Adversity and struggle are not questions of if they will happen, but when they will happen during your life and entrepreneurial journey. Understanding yourself and learning how to utilize times of unforeseen hardships are the keys to ensuring you find continuous success. Today, we'll hear the story of one man's misfortune, his journey through recovery, and why he believes continued growth and success must first begin from within. Welcome to the TnT Podcast, where we dive into the stories of career trailblazers and learn about their trials and triumphs along the way. I'm your host, Drew Hantla, and today we have Alan Lazaros, the founder and CEO of Next Level University, a platform that aims to unravel the journey of finding success and fulfillment throughout life. On today's show, Alan details his life journey and the adversity he has experienced from a very young age and how the challenges never stopped coming. He details a very specific moment that made him question who he was and how he wants to live his life moving forward as an entrepreneur. Alan breaks down his latest venture and why he believes everyone must improve internally before true success appears in the external boundaries of our lives. He provides real-world examples of how different minds operate and the various approaches targeted specifically for each. Follow along to hear more from Alan. We hope you'll enjoy. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
So thank you for having me. I always try to say this because 9 years ago I started listening to podcasts, and now I'm on the other end of that. I'm speaking into the podcast, and I never take it lightly, the fact that I get a chance to speak into the lives of other people. And so thank you for having me. It is an honor, and I do not take that lightly. I just want to make that as clear as possible.
To help kind of the audience get a better idea of what we have ahead of us today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm pumped to do this too because I love audio only. You can really get into your brain on these without the video, so this is going to be good. So in terms of who I am, it's not just the message, it's the messenger. And I remember I used to hear podcasts. I would hear these people come on the microphone, and they were such strong orators. They spoke with such clarity. They were inspiring, motivating, and educating. And it sounded to me like they had their stories all figured out. And now I've become one of those people. So I want to make it clear to everyone who is listening to this that I'm going to tell this story because I think it's important to know who you're learning from and to provide context as to who I am. But I do want to make it as clear as humanly possible that this is not something I had figured out until my 30s. So hindsight is 2020. I often use the reference of I saw Finding Nemo in 2003. I rode my bike to the movies, and then I rewatched that movie as an adult. And it's kind of like rewatching a movie that you saw as a kid and realizing, oh, now I get it. Okay, that joke makes sense now. Oh, interesting. I never noticed that before. And so I've sort of rewatched the movie of my own life over and over and over again, particularly in my 30s when I started doing some therapy. And so when I tell this story, just remember, if it sounds like a very understood narrative, it was only understood in hindsight. So that said, my life definitely started in adversity. And again, I didn't necessarily understand that fully at the time. But so when I was 2 years old, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28 years old. His name was John McCorkle. My real last name is actually McCorkle. It's not Lazaros. I took my stepfather's last name. So I had a stepfather from age 3 to age 14. And so my birth father, John, had a big Irish Catholic family. It was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joe, Joan, Jeanette. And when my stepfather came into the picture, so when my father passed away, he was 28, I was 2. My older sister was 6. My mother was 31. She was a stay-at-home mom. And she got with my stepdad. My stepdad was Steve Lazaros. And we kind of didn't talk much with the McCorkles because we were sort of trying to be the Lazaroses, for lack of better phrasing. And I was around 7, I think, and my mom gave me the choice to my sister and I to take my stepfather's last name, and we both did. So now I'm Alan Lazaros. I playfully refer to the ages from 3 to 14 for myself as boats and BS. And the reason I do is because it was late 90s, early 2000s, dot-com bubble. My stepfather worked for a company called AGFA. They did hospital computers, and the 90s were boom times, particularly in the U.S., and so we did very well financially. But my mom and stepdad did not really get along, and that's the very polite way to put it. And so from 3 to 14, it was Xbox, Dreamcast, early Christmas presents, ski trips, motorcycles, snowmobiles. We lived on a small lake, big pond. It was, we had a yacht, we had apartment buildings. We did very well, upper middle class. And When my stepdad left when I was 14 years old, he took 90% of the income with him. And I went from early Christmas presents, vacations, ski trips, to I get free lunch at school now because our income is so low. I'm shopping at Salvation Army now, and my mom trades in her BMW for a little Honda Civic type of thing. And so he got the yacht and the apartment building. We got the house and the dog. And at that same time, my sister moved out. This was the hardest year of my life, but I didn't realize that until I started doing therapy in my 30s. I'm 14 years old. Stepfather leaves, takes his entire extended family with him, as well as 90% of the income. So my Grandma Joan, Grandpa George, aunts and uncles, all of them, haven't seen a single one of them since. Now keep in mind, I don't talk to the McCorkle side either. That same time, my mom and her sister, my Aunt Sandy, get in a fight. And my aunt sort of ostracizes us from my mom's side of the family too. And I have since only seen one of them. So now it's just me and my mom in that big house by ourselves. And I essentially, for lack of better phrasing, lost 3 families by the time I'm 14 years old. And again, at the time, I didn't honestly know that. I knew things were messed up and I knew my life was hard. I just didn't really fully embrace or feel or face the ridiculousness that is all that. Not to mention, it's all I've ever known. So, you're a kid, you don't really know. So fast forward, I go from basically excited to go to my dream college, WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's kind of like a mini MIT in Massachusetts. We have a joke at WPI, friends don't let friends go to MIT, kind of a little competitive school thing there. And so my dream was to get in there, but it was $50,000 a year. Even if I do get in, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to go. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do. And again, didn't know this at the time, but now I realize my trauma response to adversity was aim higher, work harder, get smarter. And as far as trauma responses go, that's a pretty positive one. And so I did. I bootstrapped all through high school. I got what's referred to as the President's Award. I don't know if they're doing this anymore, but you basically have to get straight A's through all of high school for every single report card. So 4 years, 4 report cards each year, 4 terms, 16 report cards total, not a single B. Fast forward, I get into my dream school. I get tons of scholarships and financial aid. I was the obnoxious kid at the award ceremony that might as well not sit down because I just was one of the names that kept getting called. And I was able to go to my dream school. Not only did I get in, but I got enough financial aid and scholarships to actually go. So I go, I get my computer engineering degree, and then I get my master's in business. I stay the extra year, and then I'm off to the races. And at this point, I've had internships. So I did all the different tech companies that I could get jobs at. So I did iRobot, I did Sensata Technologies, I did Oz Development, I worked for a company called Simplex Grinnell, Tyco Safety Products, and I eventually landed at a company called Cognex, where I started a little inside sales engineering team, and then I eventually got promoted to outside sales, and my territory was Vermont, Connecticut, and Western Mass. And I'm an outside sales engineer now, and I'm making almost $200,000 a year. So I go from sophomore in college making $8 an hour painting houses in Maine to basically a top 1% global earner within just a 3 to 5 year period. I have more money than I know what to do with. I paid off $84,000 worth of debt in a single year. That was my goal, to get out of debt, number one. And then number two was investment account. So I had $150,000 in a Vanguard account, and I bought tech companies. I bought a bunch of Cognex. I bought S&P 500. I bought these index funds that I knew would grow over time. And I had millionaire mentors, and I was off to the races. I was off to achieve my dream, like a Fortune 500 CEO of a tech company like my hero, Steve Jobs. And that's when I got in my own car accident. So I'm 26. I'm up in New Hampshire with my little cousin. We're not partying or drinking or anything, but we're playing Call of Duty. And we are going to TGI Fridays. And this is back in 2015, really bad winter, where the snowbanks were covering the signs in New Hampshire. I was supposed to yield 3-way fork. Didn't yield. I end up on the wrong side of the road. And I look up from the GPS and I see the biggest, brightest lights I'd ever seen, what I thought was a Mack truck. And for anyone who's had that life or death situation, death of a loved one, death of a pet, it's really, really quite traumatic. And so for me, fortunately, it was not a Mack truck. It was actually a lift-kitted pickup truck, which there's a lot of those up in New Hampshire. And I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat that I bought for $5,000 cash because I wanted to get out of debt and invest all my money. So I didn't want to waste money on a car. And that Volkswagen Passat was what I used to call the tank. It was a German-engineered steel trap Volkswagen, and this car definitely saved my life. So it was completely totaled. Both airbags did deploy. My cousin hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face on the airbag, but we were okay physically. Now, I was messed up mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So physically, I was okay, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I was messed up because my father died in a car accident when he was 28. I've seen pictures of his car, and they don't look very different than mine. So this was the second chance my dad never got. And so for me, I was just quarter-life crisis, existential crisis. Who am I? What's the point? What if that was it? Am I proud of the man I've become? Type of questions. And after that, the best way I can describe it now, again, at the time it was all messy, I didn't get it, but now I kind of do. I was filled with regret. And prior to 26, I was very achievement-oriented. I was very improvement-oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement-oriented. I wasn't personal growth-oriented. I wasn't personal development-oriented. The mirror wasn't on me. It was more, I can become this person or I can achieve this thing, rather than the self-improvement, self-reflection, self-acceptance, self-work. And so I flipped the script. So the best way I describe it is before 26, I was successful and deeply unfulfilled. After 26, I was extremely fulfilled because I went all in on inner work, but I actually ended up broke, and I went all the way past broke. As a broke entrepreneur, I know a lot of people can relate. And now I'm very grateful to reach a point. This was 9 years ago, but now I'm very grateful to be successful and fulfilled. And so the lesson in that is, listen, being successful and unfulfilled really sucks. Being fulfilled and unsuccessful also kind of sucks, but it's not as bad. What really is the ticket, the thing that I think we all need to shoot for is being successful and fulfilled. And it's very hard to be ambidextrous and to have both, because life is this constant dance between professional development and personal development, success externally and fulfillment internally. And so very few of us, we're all righty or lefty. We all think everyone else is wrong. The truth is it's a spectrum, and we all need to become ambidextrous. And it's very difficult to do that because the advice you get for one person is actually detrimental to you. And the advice you give to someone else, it's like the medicine that you give to cure one patient actually kills another. And that's why holistic self-improvement has become my thing, because I'm trying to customize and help people understand that you can have both, but you have to understand what fulfillment is. You have to understand what creates it. You have to understand who you actually are. You have to do the outer work and the skills and the resume and the professional development and the cover letter, LinkedIn, but you also have to do the inner work, the therapy, the trauma, the understanding your past, who are you, core values stuff too. And so most people, if what you wanted was what you needed, you'd already have it. Most people are doing one or the other, myself included. I was all professional development, skills, achievement, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, but inner work was not a thing. And then I meet these other people that love inner work. They adore it. They're very holistic, heart-driven, well-rounded people, but they just don't win in the economy because they just don't have the hard skills. And so I think that's why life is so challenging, is because we're all in kind of one of two buckets, and we really do need to learn how to be ambidextrous. And I had to learn that the hard way.
Alan, a wonderful backstory full of roller coasters, ups and downs. Just to complete the timeline for sake, talk us through eventually kind of how you got into the podcasting and coaching journey.
Okay, so 9 years ago was the car accident. And after that, it was PTSD plus PTG. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a very real thing. The car accident, I definitely had some of that. And then post-traumatic growth. And that's the two sides of the coin. Everything's two sides of every coin. Everything's paradoxical. It's duality. And so post-car accident, it was, I'm claustrophobic now. Double yellow lines scare me. Getting back in a car is hard. Crowds bother me. I had some challenges on the mental health side. I was working on those, but I also had this amazing amount of post-traumatic growth of every personal development book I can get my hands on, learning TED Talk. I'm just going down the rabbit hole of self-reflection and growth. And so that was 9 years ago. 2 years into that journey, I started a podcast called Conversations Change Lives. And I also went all in on fitness after the car accident as well. All in. It was when I really got my health in order. But anyways, so I started a little podcast called Conversations Change Lives because I looked back at my past and I wondered why some of the people from my past didn't really achieve their dreams. And I figured, okay, well, I think it's because I had great mentors. And now I realize that's not really it, but that's part of it. So I started that podcast. And my first guest was actually a man named Kevin. So Kevin is my business partner now, Kevin Palmieri. And so he had a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. Change the way you think, change the way you act, change the way you live. And so I was his first guest. He was my first guest. I was his first guest. And then we eventually just kind of partnered up and just started recording episodes every week. And we had the worst naming podcast of all time. It was the Conversations Change Lives meets Hyperconscious Podcast. And so eventually we went all in on the Hyperconscious Podcast. And we started with 1 a week, then we did 2 a week, then we eventually jumped to 3 a week. I think we bumped to 5 and then eventually 7. So we do an episode every day now. Around the 400, 500 mark, we rebranded to what's now known as Next Level University. Level up your life, love, health, and wealth. And it's all about holistic self-improvement in your pocket every day from anywhere on the planet, completely free. And now we have a whole business around that. And we have a 21-person team, and we've got 21 departments. That's actually not correlated necessarily. But we have a book club, and we have monthly meetups we do every month. We have our own journal now. We have an app, a habit tracker. We coach people, podcast coaching and business coaching. And we've got all these different things going on now. But it all started with 2 young boys without fathers who needed a male role model and who wanted to talk about existential stuff and how to improve our lives and ourselves, who really both had sort of a quarter life crisis right around 26. And we both grew up in the same town. And here we are today still. We just actually surpassed our million listen and $1 million mark, which is wild. So now it's this global thing. We're heard in 170 countries and a top 100 global show. But it all started with just him and I being a couple bodybuilders who really want to go deep and talk about life. And we just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it and grinded for basically 7 years now. And here we are.
Well, first off, congrats. And second off, I just want to make sure we reiterate that we really appreciate you opening up about your story and being open and vulnerable about it all for the sake of everyone else being willing to learn from your experience. And building off of that, you've had a lot of experiences where you could have turned a different direction. Not necessarily that direction would have been bad, but it obviously wouldn't have gotten you maybe where you were today, or things would look different, whatever it may be. How do you feel that in each of those scenarios you found the strength to either continue to rebuild or restructure or just continue to move forward?
So I say this because I need to make sure everyone knows I'm not just talking. So I'm coming up on my 10,000 hours of coaching, speaking, podcasting, and training. And rather than that being something great about me, the point is I have a big sample set now. So I coach, I have 23 people on my roster. My youngest is 18, my oldest is 63. So all different ages, all different backgrounds, all different countries. And I've done so many hour-long sessions and I've gone deep with so many people, pulling back the curtain behind the scenes, that now I kind of see where I fit compared to other people. And so I need to say this disclaimer. There's 2 advantages that I had in life, big ones. And honestly, statistically speaking, and this is actually also hard to share, takes courage, is I didn't really have any other advantages, just 2. But without these 2 advantages, there's no way I would have. And I didn't know that until my 30s, until I started learning there's something called an ACE score. It's adverse childhood experiences. And people who have a high ACE score typically not only lead to early mortality, but they certainly don't succeed typically. But sometimes they do. And sometimes they do big. And so I just happened to be one of those, and now I kind of get why. 2 advantages. Number 1, I was born in a free country that had something called equal opportunity. I went to one of the best tech schools on the planet. That's $50,000 a year because my state and my country invests in young minds that prove themselves. So that's number 1. Equal opportunity, we talk about it, but it's not equal and we all know it. And the truth is, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be where I am. Going to WPI was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I often playfully joke, best decision I ever made was going to WPI. Second best decision was leaving my ex. Third best decision was DMing my current girlfriend, Emilia, who's the absolute biggest gift of my entire existence. Okay, so number 1 is equal opportunity. Thank goodness I was born in a free country with equal opportunity. Number 2 is a super powerful brain, super powerful mind. And the truth is, the hard truth is that I would never have made it here without those 2 things. The fact that I had those 2 things and statistically, ACE score-wise, I pretty much had every other disadvantage you can think of, which is wild to think of, which I didn't know until my 30s. And I also want to say this too, I do realize there is an advantage as a white Caucasian male as well. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But the point is those are my only advantages. Everything else was pretty much a stray from an ACE score perspective, adverse childhood experiences. Now, that said, what was it that made the difference? And I've been asking myself that question my entire adult life. Because I always looked at my peers, and I playfully refer to where I grew up as the Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And while I'm playful, it is a small town, small-minded town. It is what it is. I'm just calling it out. And a lot of people would probably be mad at me for saying that. So what made the difference? How did I do this? Number one, my trauma response happened to be aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Now, is that because I wanted to prove to my stepdad that I was worthy of his love and he never really wanted kids? Is that because I have this really powerful mind? Is it because I'm good at what I call STEMBIF, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, and finance, and that always came naturally to me? Here's what I've got it broken down to. Self-belief. How do two siblings have similar adverse childhood experience scores, ACE scores, but one of them end up in a very different place than the other? Is it natural inclinations? Is it gifts? Is it one of them was a genius and the other one wasn't? Is it one is gifted and one isn't? I don't know. I would say there's some of that. But what I am certain of is that when adversity struck, because there's this quote in the self-improvement space that your adversity becomes your advantage. And I always loved that early on. You know, when I first got into personal development, I agreed. I was like, yeah, your adversity is your advantage. And you can turn your adversity into success. And it helps you develop the emotional muscles that other people just don't have to go do extraordinary things that ordinary people simply can't do. And the truth is, there is some truth to that. If you didn't have any adversity in your childhood, you are probably a little bit soft, statistically speaking, and that will be a long-term detriment. Okay? Suffering does build emotional muscle, but it also creates trauma. And if you don't have high self-belief, and you don't have a positive self-concept, aka identity, and you don't have self-worth, the chances of you building a bigger, better, brighter future out of adversity are actually slim. And so two people both have horrible adversity. One of them believes in themselves and their own bigger, better, brighter future, so they aim higher, work harder, get smarter. The other one doesn't believe in themselves but doesn't know about that they don't. What are they going to do? They're going to turn to vices, alcohol, drugs, whatever. Now, I did both, and I want to be very transparent about this. I drank too much and too often. I grew up in an environment where alcohol, my mom and stepdad loved to party, and therefore all the people they surrounded themselves with also loved to party. And so my whole world was that, and I very much adopted that. So in high school, I partied. In college, I partied. And in corporate, I partied too. So in hindsight, I wish that I hadn't. And so it wasn't until after 26, after that car accident, that I really took a look inward at not only my past, but myself. And I started to really overcome that. I often playfully say, it took me 5 years to quit drinking. I kept falling off at weddings. Weddings were my kryptonite. Now I realize why, because I've since analyzed this. You go to a wedding, the only thing any of us have in common is we all knew this couple at some point in the last couple decades, and we have nothing else in common. So what are you going to do? Open bar, social anxiety, I'm going to have a drink. So 1 would turn to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and it's off to the races. But so weddings were my kryptonite. It took me a long time to quit drinking. Now I'm very grateful. This was 9 years ago when I tried to quit drinking, and now I'm coming up on probably my 5th year. I used to count the days every single day. I don't know the number of days anymore, but it's coming up on 4 or 5 years. But the point is that vices and virtue are universal. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what country you're born in. We all know that greed is a vice and compassion is a virtue. We all know that humility is a virtue and arrogance is a vice. We all know that drugs and alcohol are vices and that virtues are, healthy foods, going to the gym. There are positive, constructive choices that make us bigger and brighter, and there are things that dim our light and cause us to deteriorate. And most people who have adverse childhood experiences, statistically speaking, you can look this up, deteriorate. But there's a select few that end up just really igniting the compound effect of exponential growth. And I'm very fortunate to have been one of those people. So I've been trying to figure out why. Why me? I look at my past and I go, all of you said you had goals and dreams. I don't get it. Now, I also realized they were mirroring me. My whole life has been goals and dreams. So everyone around me mirrors me and they start talking about goals and dreams. Every room you're in, you change the room. So I think the whole world is goals and dreams. And my business partner, Kev, says, dude, no one has goals and dreams. They're just saying that when they're around you. Oh, got it. Self-belief, though, is at the core. If you don't believe in yourself and your own bigger, better, brighter future, unfortunately, you won't invest in it. And if you won't invest in it, it's not going to get bigger and better and brighter. So it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of vice and being stuck.
Were there things early on in this development you felt like were at least a turning point? I guess, what did you turn to when you found that self-motivation, that internal desire to continue to grow and motivate yourself?
The first thing that came to mind was fitness. Like I said, I drank too much and too often. I was 160 pounds, skinny fat alcoholic. I'll just call a spade a spade. And again, the interesting thing about that is I used to call myself an alcoholic, but there were people around me that drank way more and had a way bigger problem than me. The only difference is I owned it. And the ironic thing is, until you own it, you're not going to work on a problem you think you don't have. So there's a lesson in that too, is just call a spade a spade. Call yourself out. Yeah, I was an alcoholic. I drank too much and too often. I neglected my responsibilities. I poisoned my own brain. I didn't maximize my potential. Like, you have to call yourself out, because a lot of people will allow mediocrity to be the standard. And maybe that's okay for them, but it's not okay for you. And so it wasn't okay for me anyways. So health and fitness always bothered me. I was really doing health and fitness well in sophomore into junior year of college. So when I was 19, 20, 21, those years, I started really dialing in my fitness, and then I completely fell off. And I fell off so bad. And in corporate, I was just so disappointed in me. And the story that comes to mind, I wrote a blog about, might have been 2014. I don't remember when the movie came out, but I saw there's a man named Henry Cavill. He's an actor who was Superman in one of the Superman movies. And I went to see it. I was in IMAX, and I had a big Mountain Dew I had spiked with Captain Morgan, and I had gone out to dinner with one of my buddies in the area after work, and we went to the movies, and I was drinking at the movies. And there's this one scene where he gets out of a lake, and this dude is just jacked, in great shape. And it was such a big mirror for me that I actually pretended to have to go to the bathroom. And I left the theater, and I went to the bathroom, and I dumped out my Captain Morgan and Mountain Dew. And I just looked in the mirror, and I just wept. Man in the glass, man to man, self to self. Dude, you have really let yourself down. This is just not okay, and you know it. And so, again, maybe a little hard on myself, but truth is, you need a kick in the butt every now and then. And no one's going to give it to you except for you. So I cried. I felt the pain. I looked in the mirror. I looked at what I was versus that man. And I knew, this is the other thing, without self-belief, would I actually have done this? I actually believed I could look like that guy, Henry Cavill. Now, here's the thing. After that, I started dialing in fitness. I started going back to the gym. I started doing what I call my Naturally Fit for Life program, which is sleep, hydration, nutrition, training, mobility, breathwork, and supplementation. And I became a fitness coach, fitness model, fitness competitor. I did 41 photo shoots. And I'm telling you, I was in way better shape than Henry Cavill. And now I'm not what I was, but now I'm more business than I am fitness, but I'm still in better shape than I ever was back then. The point is, though, I wonder to myself, am I hard on myself because I know and believe in myself? And would that work for someone who doesn't believe in themselves? Or does my brain actually know how to reverse engineer things so I kind of know what I'm leaving on the table every day? Because I remember one time my business partner, Kev, he said, dude, you're so disciplined. And I said, brother, I don't think I'm as disciplined as you think. I think I'm just more aware of the downside of lack of self-discipline. Like, I can calculate how much money I'm leaving on the table by not doing coaching today. Like, not a lot of people work on Saturday. I think they probably would if they could actually calculate how much money they're losing. Not just money, but impact and growth and potential and learning and mastery. And if you knew what you were giving up, the opportunity cost, you probably would be more disciplined. And so I don't really know. I will say, to answer your original question, health and fitness matters to me at a level 12 out of 10. It is the most important thing in the entire world to me. And it was back then, even when I was letting it ride. And so I was just letting myself down. You break the promises to yourself, you're not going to have any self-worth. You're not going to have any self-respect. And so that was the first place I started. I just started going to the gym and I started exercising. I started tracking my calories and my macros, and I started hydrating, and I stopped drinking, and I started just living and breathing a healthy, fit lifestyle. And at the end of the day, health and fitness has got to be where you start. If you don't have your health and fitness dialed in, you're not going to feel good about yourself almost no matter what you do. Maybe that's just a me thing, so don't let me project on everybody. But for me, if you said, Alan, here's $1 million and I'll trade bodies with you, absolutely not. There's nothing better than being healthy and fit. I'm serious. I was an athlete. I was wildly out of shape. I was wildly out of shape in my early 20s, and I was wildly in shape winning fitness competitions in my late 20s. And I'm telling you right now, there is nothing. Being an athlete is the best thing in the world. Waking up in the morning, feeling good, looking good, let's call a spade a spade. It is the best thing in the entire world. When you take your shirt off or get in that bikini and you feel good and not insecure, which by the way is wildly rare, it's the best thing in the entire world. And I just think that we don't own it. We don't say that because it's the hardest thing in the world to do. It's a full-time job staying in shape. And at the end of the day, we want quick fixes and stuff like that. So to answer your original question, I had to dial that in first. And still to this day, I actually focus on fitness every single day. I'm actually coming up on, I usually don't share this, but I will here. I am coming up on 2.5 years actually without a miss. So Emilia and I, we started a fitness challenge almost 2.5 years ago, March 1st of 2022. So it's actually more closer to 2.25 years, I round up. But we've exercised every day for 30 minutes for, I think, almost 1,000 days now. It all started with, hey, I want to see if I can beat 4 months. And then we went to a year. And then after a year, we went to 2 years. And eventually I think we might do this forever. Now, remember, it's only a half an hour and walking my dog counts. Okay. So I'm not a professional athlete or anything like that. But dialing in your fitness, I think, is priority 1, 2, and 3.
A lot of what we're talking about here, down to the root, sounds like a lot of self-dialogue. And you've mentioned, right, a lot of like either kicking yourself in the butt or bootstrapping, picking yourself up. So not necessarily one mindset's the right mindset. Do you have any advice on that internal dialogue and just how to handle it in a healthy manner?
Yeah, the inner self-talk thing, like what's the record playing? And this is the reason why advice is so dangerous, because it all depends on your record, your internal record. So just to overly simplify, just so everyone understands it, I gave a speech once in Pittsburgh to a group of individuals. So I talked about the two records. On one end, our record playing is I'm the best, I'm awesome, I've got this, I can do it, I've got this, I'm awesome, I'm the best, I can do this. That's the narrative unconsciously. So subconsciously, unconsciously, some version of I got this, I can do it, that kind of thing. And that's my record. So anyone who doesn't have that record is usually triggered by me and thinks I'm a little arrogant. What they don't realize is that I just have a different narrative. And I have a lot of self-belief and I have a lot of evidence to prove that I'm capable of things. And I don't know where quantum abilities fall into this because, I mean, I'm sure LeBron James doesn't doubt himself in basketball that much. So some of this is just inherent natural abilities because if you enter me in a strongman competition, I'm going to get stomped and I don't have any self-belief. I'm not that strong, genuinely. But if you enter me in something else that I know I'm good at, I'll always have that narrative, right? So some of this is circumstantial. But if my unconscious and subconscious is 40,000 times more powerful than my conscious mind, and my record is, I've got this, I'm amazing, I can do it, you can do it, you're the man, whatever it is, then the last thing I need is more belief. Self-belief is a superpower, but it also comes with a weakness, which is called arrogance. Overconfidence is just as big of a weakness as any other, if not the biggest weakness, as a matter of fact. Lack of humility has got to be the biggest weakness in the human condition. I'm convinced of it. But of course, I would think that because anyone who already has self-belief, what do they need more of? Humility. So if you have level 10 self-belief, you better have humility in the other direction, or you are coming for catastrophe, and you are a delusional person who just will get smacked down one way or another. And that was me, for sure. Kevin was on the other end. Kevin's narrative is you're not enough, you're not smart enough, you're not good looking enough, you're not good enough, it's not going to work, this is going to suck, this is going to go horribly wrong. So I had to learn from Kev, and now I hold the duality of long-term optimism with productive paranoia. It's not an or, it's an and. It's called the genius of the and. You have to be optimistic about the future. You have to, otherwise you won't invest in it. Who's going to invest in a stock they don't think is going to grow? And if you don't invest in the stock, it won't grow because no one invests. Therefore, it gets smaller or bigger. Smaller. Then it doesn't grow. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. So someone like Kev needs to learn how to be more optimistic and how to believe in himself. And you can build self-belief. By the way, I actually have a formula. No one else has uncovered the formula because the people with self-belief don't know they have it. The people without it think the other people with self-belief are delusional, and sometimes they are, by the way. And there's a difference between inflated self-worth that's ego versus actually merited self-belief of I actually can do this through competence and confidence. But that's all another discussion. So the point is my answer to that question has to be catered because I'm hard on myself, which is good for me. But that's because my narrative is already so positive. So I'm not going to drive to center by saying, you got this, Alan, and you can totally do it. And that's not going to help me. I got to wake up in the morning and say, Alan, I know you think you can get 50 things done today. Truth be told, you can't miss a trick, man, because you're only going to get 15 of those things done. You got to stay humble. But for Kevin, who thinks he can't do anything, he's got to say, Kev, you got this. You can do it. You got this. You can do 5 things. So I'm trying to do 50 things, and I got to say, Alan, you're not going to get those done if you don't focus on these 5. And he's over here thinking he can get 0 things done, and he needs to up the ante. And so your self-talk, people my whole life are like, you're so hard on yourself. You need to be easier on yourself. Talk nicer to yourself. It's like, listen, I know you think you're trying to give me good advice, but the truth of the matter is that doesn't work for me. Now, I'm not trying to be a drill sergeant and crush my self-worth, but the truth is, I know I'm leaving it on the table. I know I'm letting it ride. I know my true potential. A lot of people would be blown away by 2 years of exercise consistently. And I'm pretty happy with it, but the truth is, I'm not in as good a shape as I want to be. And that is what it is. And I haven't been dieting as well as I could. And I'm also comparing to me when I was a fitness model, fitness coach, fitness competitor. So the inner dialogue stuff, you got to ask the right questions for you. So the right question for me is, Alan, where are you? Where might you be overly optimistic? For Kev, where might you be overly pessimistic? What might work out that you think can't happen? And the only reason I know any of this, by the way, Drew, is because of my business partner, Kev. He struggled with self-belief and I didn't, and we didn't understand what all that was. And so most of the people who have a high amount of self-belief, they actually have low self-worth because they're called arrogant, they're usually unlovable, they don't fit in easily, they have huge goals and dreams, but people pick on them. And people with low self-belief usually seem very humble, but sometimes they're actually pretty arrogant inwardly and they don't put in the work because they don't believe in themselves. And so at the end of the day, I only know all this because I've coached so many people at this point. And if you're going to focus on anything, figure out which side you're on. Sorry about that. Figure out which side you're on and then work on driving to 5. You got to drive to center. If you're overly pessimistic with yourself, you got to learn how to believe in yourself. If you're delusional and overly optimistic, you have got to stay humble and you've got to eat humble pie every day and you've got to consistently challenge yourself.
Alan, I know you're a busy man and I know that we have only so much time here with you today. I would love to keep going and talking more into these concepts and ideas, but man, what has been presented today is I'm very appreciative and I hope everyone else is as well. We appreciate you coming on today, sir. We love what we heard.
Thank you so much for having me, Drew. I do not take it lightly. Like I said at top, I don't take it lightly to be able to speak into other people's lives. I was a bit uncomfortable in this, not because of you, but just because I'm trying to be the real me. I'm a computer engineer through and through. I'm an analytical mind. I call a spade, and candor is one of my core values. If you want to change your life, you have to be honest. Distortion is everywhere. We're pretending we're in great shape when we're not. We're pretending our relationship is great when it's not. We're pretending that everything's going to work out when it's not. And then we're pretending we're not capable of anything on the other end when we actually are. And so how can you learn how to be optimistic about your own future, but also honest and candid in the moment in order to get there? And if you can balance those two, you're going to be in great shape. So thank you so much for having me. I really, really, really appreciate it genuinely. And thank you for creating a safe space for me to be myself, because that traditionally has been actually very hard for me.
If you enjoyed today's episodes, then feel free to explore the rest of our offerings with the Brothers Frontier Studio. If you're not already, you can follow us at Brothers Frontier on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. With new shows every week and daily content on our socials, we hope you'll find what you're looking for. If you haven't already, please leave us your feedback with a comment or rating to let us know what you thought of today's episode. Thanks for listening. We hope to catch you on our next episode of the TnT Podcast. I'll see you guys later.